The physical architecture of the Quranic text utilizes a system of alphanumeric headers to organize information into specific operational modules. Chapters 10 through 15 all begin with the exact same three Arabic letters, Alif, Lam, and Ra. These isolated letters are frequently dismissed as untranslatable mysteries or abstract theological markers. However, the internal architecture of the text points to a precise function. The Alif Lam Ra sequence acts as a systemic header, an operational protocol that categorizes all the data that follows it. Like a command line executing a script, this header prepares the intellect of the reader for a highly specific mode of interaction with the information. The text is actively executing a command for strict empirical observation and historical auditing. To understand how the sequence works, we have to look at the system's foundational hardware. Several earlier chapters open with a different sequence, Alif, Lam, Mim. The Alif Lam Mim sequence governs the verification circuit. It maps data from the absolute source down to physical manifestation, represented by the letter Mim. But in chapters 10 through 15, the Mim is stripped away and swapped out for the letter Ra. Altering this single variable reroutes the entire operational purpose of the text that follows. By terminating the sequence with Ra, the system shifts its focus entirely outward, demanding objective processing of external evidence. We can decompile this protocol by isolating its variables, beginning with the first letter, Aleph. Within the system's internal lexicon, Aleph is al-awwal. Al-awwal is the Arabic concept of the absolute first, preceding all physical creation. It represents the systemic intent. It is the primary originating source of all subsequent data. The variable Aleph defines the baseline authority and pure potential from which all biological codes and physical laws emerge. In any logical framework, there must be an uncaused starting point. The Alif serves exactly this function. Before a single physical law or biological code can be observed in nature, the system requires an originating authority. The sequence then moves down the logic chain to the second variable, Lam. Lam defines the principle of tanzil. Tanzil refers to the active process of information or physical matter descending from a higher origin. This is the active mechanism of sending down specific parameters and laws. Lam acts as the bridge of connectivity. It spans the gap between the absolute source of the Alif and the observable human domain. It guarantees the integrity of the signal, establishing an unbroken data tether between the creator and the created environment. This brings us to the final, defining variable that alters the sequence, Ra. Ra is the semantic root for two critical words, Ra'a and Ru'ya. Ra'a means to physically see an object, while Ru'ya refers to the internal insight derived from that observation. Systemically, this translates to the concept of basira. Basira denotes a high level of empirical discernment and objective observation. The Ra variable marks the exact intersection where the transmitted signal must be met by the human eye. It functions as the user interface of the human intellect. The data transmission cannot complete its circuit without human analytical rigor. The observer is required to physically see and rigorously verify the input. Synthesizing these three variables gives us a complete operational logic. The source, Alif, transmits the link, Lam, specifically to be observed and verified, Ra. We can test this reading by looking at the very first word executed immediately after this header in chapters 10 and 12. The text reads, Alif, Lam, Ra. These are the verses of the clear book. The command pivots on the linguistic pointer, tilka. Tilka is an Arabic demonstrative pronoun meaning those or these, used to single out a tangible target. Using tilka operates identically to a scientist pointing at raw data on a monitor. It forcefully directs your gaze toward tangible evidence. The combination of the Alif Lam Ra header and the pointer tilka directs the human brain to treat the subsequent verses as data points for empirical analysis. When we zoom out, we can see how this header governs the macro structure of the Quran. The 5 chapters governed by this sequence, surahs 10 through 15, serve as the system's historical case studies. By utilizing the Ra parameter, these chapters demand that the auditor analyze the natural and historical record for consistency. These specific modules investigate the verification of divine laws through the lens of cosmic mechanics and the rise and fall of socio-economic cycles. The clustering of these surahs is entirely controlled by the evidentiary tone demanded by their shared ALR header. The Alif Lam Ra protocol makes a very specific demand. The auditor must look outward at the natural and historical record. The purpose of this audit is to independently verify the structural perfection and consistency of the originating source. Modern approaches to ancient texts often assume they require blind faith and passive reception. But the structural architecture of this text reveals that it is purposefully designed for scrutiny. The text actively presents revelation as an open interface that requires rigorous, objective verification from the human mind. Traditional analysis frequently treats religious texts as mystical poetry. This document functions as a highly calibrated technical manual. Several chapters open with the prefix Alif Lam Ra, or ALR. This sequence serves as a version header, a specific metadata protocol notifying the user they are entering a module governed by observable physics. This header marks a section focused on observable integrity. It requires the auditor to engage their empirical verification hardware rather than relying on internal assumptions. This forensic examination of the ancient manuscript allows us to isolate the 3 variables required to boot this operating system. The first variable is Aleph, representing the source, the hardware architect who originates the baseline data packet. The second variable is Lam, the transmission data link downloading the code to a human node. This circuit diagram illustrates the final, critical variable, Ra. Ra represents empirical observation, the process of visually auditing the physical environment. The ALR sequence functions as a circuit that forces the human node to actively audit physical reality to verify the source code. Surah Yunus, or Chapter 10, functions as the system's initial observation module. It identifies an anomaly in the human processor, termed amazement. This is the tendency to demand strange, supernatural magic instead of processing measurable data. The text corrects this by redirecting the user toward the physical constants of the universe as proof of the source. This vintage photograph of the sun captures the raw command in execution. The text identifies the sun strictly as an empirical, mathematical radiator. The system presents the moon's phases as an explicit engine for calculating time and accounting for years. The surah reaches a systemic checkpoint with the command Anzuru, or observe. This is the verbal manifestation of the letter Ra, initiating a full visual audit. Orbiting celestial bodies are used as a verifiable dataset, proving the transmission through orbital mechanics. In Chapter 11, the investigation moves from the physics of the cosmos to the thermodynamics of social collapse. The Ra protocol in this module acts as a forensic eye, mapping the historical cause and effect of human civilizations. These massive stone ruins act as laboratories of history, providing physical data on how human societies thrive or perish based on objective law. The text demands a binary visual audit of human settlements, beginning with those that maintained integrity and remained standing. These crumbling brick foundations represent the alternative. They are the visual evidence of societies that deviated from the code and were subsequently mown down. This forensic audit is designed to stabilize the user's core processor through the processing of hard historical truth. Historical tragedies are presented as the predictable, observable results of violating the architect's objective laws. Surah Yusuf, or Chapter 12, shifts the audit towards psychological resilience and macroeconomic forecasting. Ra manifests here as insight, or basira. This is the ability to observe internal data and map it into external reality. Yusuf uses this insight to decode a threat of famine into a technical resource management plan. This wheat harvest is the physical manifestation of that plan. Accurate data observation leads directly to regional economic stability. Chapter 14, Surah Ibrahim, audits the macrostructural foundation required for this level of stability. It outlines a luminosity protocol, or Nur, the transition of a society from entropic darkness to calibrated order. This crystalline, tree-like structure illustrates a good word. It represents an uncorrupted data packet that builds a stable, firm structure. Conversely, this rapidly destabilizing geometry represents what the text calls a bad word, unstable, entropic information noise that entirely lacks a firm root. This vintage photograph shows the Kaaba. Ibrahim established a zero-variable environment here, ensuring his descendants could process the source code without external noise interference. A society only thrives when its foundational definitions are built on structurally sound, zero-impedance data. The final audit in Surah Al-Hijr focuses on information security and data integrity. Guardianship, or Al-Hifiz, functions as a self-correcting structural law inherent to the code itself. This fractal-like geometric pattern represents the 7 oft-repeated transmission protocol. This recurring mathematical structure ensures the signal is always refreshed. This mathematical lock ensures the signal remains clear, automatically blocking entropic corruption. The system contrasts this protocol with the failure of the stoneworkers. They relied on physical rock barriers, ignoring the laws of systemic integrity. True security is never merely physical. No mountain can protect a society if its link to the source's logic is severed. The ALR sequence acts as a unified roadmap for navigating human reality. This rotating datasphere synthesizes our audit, scaling from orbital mechanics through historical ruins and ending in cryptographic data integrity. This header creates a sharper acoustic trajectory compared to the internal resonance of the Alif Lam meme signature. The rolling, expansive raw phoneme acts as a linguistic trigger, shifting the human node's cognitive focus away from internal acceptance and toward investigative observation of the external world. The operating system prevents the user from retreating into emotional, unverified belief. By utilizing the ALR metadata header, the text establishes a system where faith is the unavoidable result of a successful empirical audit.